Did you find a lot of personal stuff came up, conditioning came up?
Yeah.
And how did you deal with that? Because you're on your own a lot. It's not as if you had a counsellor or someone to process that.
Well, I wasn't cut off. There were people around me.
Yeah.
My girlfriend at the time came to live there towards the end. I had friends who were local. So it wasn't like I was cut off. And what happened, I think, was they were also on their journey. And I was surrounded by people who were making the journey.
Yeah.
So there's immense power in just interacting, I think, with fellow travellers, with spiritual friends. And it was also a time of a lot of emergence of a lot of new psychological ideas. So although I wasn't reading at the time, they were in the air. And so a lot of those were imbued. So I was aware of, look, this turmoil in Tim of my past and my upbringing, my conditioning, my limitations, and then this big emptiness. But fundamentally what I was exploring was what happens if I let go of all of that.
Yes.
And just enter this.
What did you find out?
It was very nice. And there was a huge amount of love available. And that it connected me to what I am.
Did you feel your personality had less control over you, your conditioning had less impact on you?
Yes. Yes, although I'd get hijacked by it. It would slip up, you'd come in unexpectedly. I would be amazed at how I could move from one state to the other. Just, how did that happen? And back again. And began to explore, a journey which has really come alive for me recently of what is the relationship between this presence, this emptiness, oneness, and Tim, who is this particular individual with a history, with certain quirks and foibles and oddities about him. Right. What is that relationship? And at that period, I would say my view was that Tim was the problem that I had to get rid of.
So you had to try and get rid of the personality or the conditioning?
Because I always felt like he was pulling me back here, where I was alienated and not at home. And when he would just shut up, then I could be in this big space where I was at home. Now, I don't feel like that now, but then that was very much the more traditional spiritual view, that somehow I had to become still enough or pure enough, or, it was very much my body becomes the temple of the soul at that time. Now, my body's much more the nightclub of the soul, but then it was more the temple of the soul.
Your body's
the nightclub of the soul. These days. These days.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come on that to a bit later. So, and then I'm just looking at my notes here, so I just get the sequence. So, and in your 20s, you co-founded the first workers' cooperative, music cooperative.
I did, yeah. Throughout all of this period, not when I was in doing the meditation, but before and after. Well, basically, my life has been very schizophrenic because there's been these two parts to me. One very drawn to the mystical, one very drawn to the creative. And not, again, much less now, but for most of my life, they saw them as they were warring. Because one was very hedonistic and wanted to create and explore and was wild, and another felt like, no, you have to do the opposite. You have to be pure and retreat from the world, and none of that really matters, and that's all just an ego trip.
So it was either or.
Yeah, it
Again,
was either or.
Polarization you're talking about.
Exactly that. Being thrown between either or. Yeah. But always attempting to reconcile them. And after, the workers' cooperative recording studio, I was working most of my life as a musician up until I became a writer, was actually just before I went to university. And that was actually, this is too big a story really, but it was a front for an occult community which we'd set up.
Sounds great.
It was very far out. And we had a year of exploring Kabbalah and Western magic, and I probably got more bizarre experiences during that adventure than at any other time in my life, because once you start playing with the psyche in that way, wow, you enter the dream, and all sorts of strange shamanic and bizarre experiences just open up. It's like being on LSD 24/7.
Yes. And then something interesting happened when you were doing a recording and you kept saying to yourself over and over again, I am not a person, I am not a person. What happened then?
Well, when I left, I came out of this meditation because I was feeling so much love. I felt like, well, look, I need to do something with this. And so it kind of pulled me back into the world. The other things that happened was I started realizing that music was affecting me very powerfully again. And that although the meditation had been huge, suddenly it felt like, no, you know, actually listening to music is having more profound effect on my state of consciousness than meditating. So I won't do that so much, I'll do this. So I was pulled back into that, ended up making music again. And there was one particular day in the studio, one night, when I was reading, I was experimenting with putting poetry to music in an attempt to bring about this deep awake state through sound. And I was using a Walt Whitman poem, beautiful poem, an inspirational poem called Miracles. And I'd written this music which was just going round on a repeat. And I read the poem, and I messed it up. It was going very well, and I said the wrong word. So I stopped, but the music kept going. And while I was waiting for the engineer to get things back ready to record, I started thinking about this paragraph in a book called I Am That by Srinivasagadatta Maharaj, whose name's a bit of a mouthful, but it kind of means Mr. Natural, which I prefer, who was a philosopher and a seller of cheap cigarettes, which is somebody who's been a lifelong smoker on and off, quite appealed to me, but a brilliant mind and a very incisive Advaitic philosopher. And there's this one paragraph where he'd said something like, all of your problems arise because you've squeezed yourself into the size of a body and the span of a lifetime. Undeceive yourself and be free. You are not a person. And that's such a great line. You are not a person. Because what's the one thing that the biggest assumption we've got is, I'm a person. Yeah. Someone comes along and goes, no, you're not. It's almost like being pinned to the wall. And I kind of knew what he meant because of all the experiences I've had, but just the way he said it was so extreme. And I was thinking about this with the music going, and I just started repeating to myself, I am not a person. And I suddenly realized it was going with a beat, so I got into that for a bit. I am not a person. It's like a mantra. Ooh, I am not a person. I was thinking, well, this is quite interesting. Maybe I could make this into a track. I am not a person. I am not a person. And then something happened, and suddenly I wasn't. And I was once again in that big state, but deeper than I'd been before. And it was absolutely clear to me that I was not a person. But Tim was still there, still going, I'm not a person, I'm not a person, but beginning to shake and, oh my God, what is going on?
But you weren't Tim.
But I wasn't Tim. There was this massive presence, this emptiness, this oneness, this love, same thing, but I was able to recognize it, I was more aware of it, I'm more conscious of it than I had been before, or in a deeper way, or a new way, and there was Tim eventually just bursting into hysterics, just laughing and laughing and laughing. And then it was like, look, Tim didn't know whether he was laughing or crying. And then eventually the engineer realised what was happening, turned the track off and went, you're all right, mate. And it's kind of calmed down a bit. And I said, yeah. He said, I told him what had happened. He said, well, we recorded all that, so it's probably one of the first mystical experiences ever recorded, but we've got it on tape. And it was, again, the seed of a new period. Because what opened up for me then was, the journey up till then had been, through my understanding, about Tim. How can Tim become enlightened? How can Tim wake up? How can Tim... And suddenly it wasn't about Tim anymore. Suddenly it was about this impersonal presence of the oneness. And I was looking at the journey then became, right, what is that and how can I be that?
Because you wrote that you understood about being conscious of being conscious.
Yes. Yeah, that the root
so let's look at that more. What is being conscious of being conscious?
Well, right now we're conscious of, there's this flow of sound and colours and shapes and thoughts. And then what I am is conscious of that.
So there's somebody or something that is conscious of everything that we're seeing, hearing, thinking.
Exactly that.